his marriage to Aisha, which is one of the biggest criticism against our Prophet. And it's perhaps one of the biggest arguments that seek to oppose and discredit Islam. Whenever Muhammad, peace be upon him, is mentioned, they will claim things about him regarding the age of the marriage of Aisha that make him look very bad, right? And the important thing to understand before we go into defending the Prophet in this situation, it's very important to understand that this criticism regarding his marriage to Aisha, a young woman, that this criticism was never ever used in history up until modern day. Critics of Islam has existed for centuries of centuries. The Christian people and even polytheists, like everyone was opposing the Prophet even in his time. And they criticized him for many things, but they never criticized his age, the age of marriage to Aisha. And it's very important to know this because this sets the backstory. This sets the standard that this was actually a normal thing to marry someone who has just hit puberty, someone between the age of 9 and 13. Now we will go and we'll show you the proof of this. But it's very important to know that neither the Jews, nor the Christians, nor the idol worshippers ever used this to, somehow vilify the Prophet. And they had very much incentive to find anything that they could to vilify him, right? So let's continue. First of all, this marriage was not proposed by Muhammad. It was proposed by, I'm not exactly sure who it was, someone in the vicinity of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. I will find and post it on the screen here. And it was a marriage proposed to strengthen family ties between Abu Bakr, which was his companion and more, and Muhammad. What we also need to understand is, these evil claims about the Prophet, if they were true, why is it the case that the Prophet, peace be upon him, waited 3 years from the actual day of the marriage? Now, okay, we have the hadith. I need to tell the hadith we have. The hadith we have about the Prophet is that Aisha radiallahu anha said that I was 6 years when the Prophet married me, and I was 9 when the Prophet consummated the marriage with me. Right? So why did he wait these 3 years, right? Because if he was that evil person they claim, he wouldn't have waited 3 years for her to mature. And by the way, the age of 9 was the average year of maturity in Arabia and in the war climates, which are hot, where women's menstrual cycles tend to go earlier than colder climate countries. So that's already a couple of evidences to show that there was nothing immoral going on here. This was an abnormal practice throughout the centuries of the world. People married, even in Judaism, in Rome, when in the age of 12 was normal, and in more warmer climates, 9, and this was absolutely normal. So claiming that Prophet was somehow abnormal or somehow immoral is absolutely wrong, because all of humanity did these practices. Now it's important to understand that any harm, if there was any harm, that is what would be immoral. Now it's important to understand that the age of marriage in Islam, and also Aisha never claimed that she was harmed at all. Actually, I will show you hadith that show that she said that he never harmed her at all. And in Islam, the consummation of a marriage can only take place if the woman is mentally and physically ready, and that there will be no harm taking place. So that's actually the standard we have in Islam, that no harm should take place. And so it could be followed that in our modern day and age, because marriage and consummation at these early times is not normal. It's not something that today is practiced anymore. Therefore, if that would be done, it could be looked at something that could harm that person, because the society around her would not accept that as normal, and there would be backlash, right? And because that would cause some mental harm to her, some insecurities, that then the age of marriage should be raised. And by the way, most of the countries today, many of the countries and many of the scholars have claimed that 16 is a good marriage age and consummation age to follow. So these things are varying based on society. But moving on here, Aisha radiallahu anha, was, one of the most important people and women in Islam. Now, why is that? Because she was formed and grew up in a way with the Prophet. Like, there is no doubt that she was a young woman when he married her, and her witnessing him so intimately at such a young and innocent age, where not only is he playing a very influential role on her, but also she didn't play a negative influence on him. And as you know, a wife and a man, they have a lot of influence on each other. And so if the Prophet, peace be upon him, married a woman who had bad character and who did many bad things, that could definitely affect the Prophet. But she was a innocent young woman who therefore could easily be formed and affected by the good nature of the Prophet. And so the balance there. But it's also important to understand that her witnessing all of what she saw about the Prophet, because a lot of the hadith we have come from her, she had a very good memory, right? And she was fresh, and she told, the people a lot of what she saw and what she heard from the Prophet, which is what, a lot of the hadith we have from her, right? From what she witnessed. So her unique position, knowledge, and example as a woman comes from the fact that she actually grew up around him, right? She matured around his presence, and therefore having no outside impure interferences. And again, we're going to go through some of the points of maybe repetition here, but this has already established that the Prophet, peace be upon him, didn't do anything immoral. This was a normal practice of the time. No one opposed it. It wasn't his own suggestion, and he waited enough time for her to mature and to actually, have menstruation and be physically able to have that marriage. Now, if he ever was a rapist or anything like that, now I utter this by words, I even say astaghfirullah for this, but that's the claims, right? He even punished a person who was a rapist in the time of with death, right? So how can he have been that if he punished someone by death with it, right? And even today, rapists, they go freely or live in luxurious prisons, right, on taxpayer money. The best thing is to eradicate these people from the world. If they can't control themselves and do such a tremendous degree of harm, that is even the more moral thing to do, if you ask me. And so anything which harms an individual psychologically or physically in relation to these concepts is illegal in Islamic fiqh. And these are a majority of the points we have. Now, moving on here, I want to go through some of the sources in Europe to show you even more that, marrying young and the average age was so normal that even in the most popular literature, this was the case. So in Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, Romeo was allegedly 17 and Juliet was 13. You can look this up yourself. In Christianity, Mother Mary was supposedly 12 years old when she had Jesus, or I don't remember correctly, when she married Joseph. She was 12, right? This is Mary. This is the highest woman in the whole Christian European world, right? So she was 12. So keep this in mind, right? This was absolutely normal. Now, let's give more context. Marriage is a crucial part to societal structures, especially in old times. It was a crucial part. In our day and age, marriage is done solely for the purpose of pleasure and love. It has no political or sociological factor. Few people marry, and for those who do so, it's after many years of having lived and experienced life with each other. That's like the main, position people come from. But the cultural and societal norm of the time, as we can see, changes. And one has to thereby judge the customs of someone based on their circumstances. So hundreds of years ago, before the modern man, marriage formed a part of the most important aspect of society. It was not only a union between a man and a woman, but between families, tribes, nations, forming coalitions, partnerships, and collaborations. And even more so, in Islam, we know that marriage is half of faith. So it's so important that it's half of our religion. In addition, marriage was done early. It was the only way for a man and a woman to come together. So it was, doing it early could protect people from falling into sin in the future. And Also, it could be taking care of the financial burden of the family, right? Because when you have a man or a woman marrying someone else, reaching puberty was all of it. Maturity came with the pivotal point of the transition between child and grown-up. The term teenager did not exist in the past. This is also an important point. What is teenager? This is a modern concept. People became grown-up as soon as their menstrual cycle came as for women, or their ejaculation for man came. This was the standard. That's the grown-up. And so these are some of the aspects that you probably didn't know. And so let's go through some sources now. In Greece, we can see that our sources here show us that in Greece, females married as young as 14 or 16. In Rome, noble women were known to marry as young as 12 years of age, whereas women in the lower societal classes were most likely to marry slightly further into the teenage years. The father had the right and duty to seek a good and useful match for his children, arranged marriage, and might arrange a child's betrothal long before he or she came of age. So the marriage could have taken place or been arranged before the age of maturity. This was Rome, this was Europe, this was civilization, right? And ancient Roman law required brides to be at least 12 years old. And in Christian Europe, Roman Christian Europe isn't the same. So in Christian Europe, we find male and female adolescents needed parental consent to marry because they were under the age of majority, 21 years old. In 12th century, the Roman Catholic Church drastically changed legal standards for marital consent by allowing daughters over 12 years old and sons over 14 to marry with their parents without their parents' approval. In modern history, the minimum age requirement was 12 and 14. It was eventually written into English civil law. By default, these provisions became the minimum marriage ages in colonial America. In France, until the French Revolution, the marriageable age was 12 years for females and 14 for males. So, again, I want to finally highlight that this was a normal practice, and 9 years of age, which is slightly younger than 12, which we have seen going on there, that is due to puberty taking place earlier in the regions where there is warmer climate. So now we have debunked this. We have gone through the Prophet's character, and we have also gone through the claim of his morality in regards to Aisha and other things.